trucks. Oh,
Bless you.
You know, and I
You
don't.
did not get for oh,
Oh,
I just don't have that same.
thanks.
I
He's
don't know
short
what
time.
I need to
you
add.
have to explain the joke or something first.
This is why I found it all that more music.
All right, we ready?
Go ahead.
I really do
Well,
think it
that
matters.
is a strong word.
All right, Dan.
Hi.
Ready.
All right. Good morning, everyone. A little earlier than we're used to see each other, but good to see you. It is my honor to call together the December 12th, 9 a.m. Work session for transportation. Very important topic to our citizens. In any case we hear, transportation and noise. So I appreciate it. This time I'll turn it over to Austin Goen and lead us through today's agenda.
All right, sounds good. Thank y'all. It is a shorter presentation than some of the ones I know we've had in the past. Transportation can be very dense, a very dense topic. As you mentioned, it does come up, I feel like, in just about every major rezoning case nowadays, specifically with a lot of the improvements I think we talked about on and on. A lot of them are underway, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. But I do want to have some discussion. I know, Mr. Lyle, you're going to be kind of shepherding a lot of this moving forward, just being on the board and having a lot of input on transportation. So I do want to get some feedback from you as a board member-elect as far as what we've got going on, some things that we're going to be looking at in the future. And if any other board members-elect we pop in for the remainder of this, I'll certainly want to get some feedback from them as well. But I will jump into the presentation here. So the agenda, as I mentioned, it is a shorter one than we have had in workshops past. As always, we are going to look over our current efforts and kind of what we have going on in the county and provide some updates there. Provide the current and the new board an update on the Goochland 6-year plan. VDOT has a 6-year plan that they look at projects as a whole, but I kind of do a deeper dive on our end for the larger projects and look at the specific funding pots. What dollars do we have associated with each project? And to fill in that 6-year plan, talk about the Goochland application plan and how we are looking at future applications, and then also discuss some of the out years, looking at 2026, 2027 as we plan for the future. Touching on kind of collaboration and partners, who we work with in the region for everybody's kind of review and knowledge there as far as how we get these applications moving forward, what are the regional bodies that we actually work with, and as well as working with VDOT. And then, as always, we'll talk about some future topics I've planned, but then also want to get feedback from the board. So jumping into our current efforts, the biggest one, as always, is the Ashland Road interchange improvements. It's been our #1 transportation priority, and fortunately it was funded through Smart Scale. The IAR, or the Interchange Access Report, it's well underway, kicked off in March of 2023. I actually have an update meeting with VDOT on the 20th of this month to figure out, they're going to officially, what's being dubbed a reveal of the interchange improvement. To date, everybody's running with the assumption it's going to be a divergent diamond, which is what we've gotten funded, but they have gone through the numbers and are going to reveal the official designation of what that interchange is going to look like. So again, everybody's assuming it's going to remain unchanged. I've not gotten any unofficial word, so to speak. Thank you, Tara. But that will be the official reveal, as well as some updates from them on the rest of the corridor, because we're studying Ashland Road from Broad Street to, I believe it's Lanier on the northern end of 64. So we're doing a pretty comprehensive corridor review, and I'm hoping as well with that December 20th meeting that we're going to look at some initial recommendations for the rest of the corridor as we look at growth in the future. The preliminary.
When did you, I'm sorry.
Yes.
When did you say we'll get the final on the design?
So the design will be revealed on the 20th of this month, so it's going to be next week.
Okay.
So hopefully it's an early Christmas present that it's still going to be the DDI, but regardless, we'll know officially what it's going to be, and then we can start working on the preliminary engineering, which is slated to kick off in January. That'll be actually starting to design the interchange. So whatever the study officially recommends to the federal government, to FHWA, we can actually start designing that particular interchange in January. And then as we move through all of this, it's a very large project, just shy of $80 million in total cost. We are expected to go to construction in June of 2028, which certainly a ways away. It's almost 4.5 years away now, but I do think it'll get here before we know it. And it's definitely needed. So I know we're working with VDOT on getting that timeline expedited as much as possible through whatever means we can. But it is a large undertaking for a project. Fairground Road extension.
Awesome, before you
Yes.
move on from there.
Yes.
Just want to make a comment, this is kind of interesting timing. I didn't realize we were going to go public with the information that Project Rocky has been canceled. The end user has decided not to move forward with the project based on a couple different things. They wanted to change the scope of the building, economic times, et cetera. Obviously, why I'm bringing this up now is because the number one question becomes, well, what does this do to our funding for the DDI? And what we are told is that it doesn't affect it at all. What it may potentially affect, if I was to have a crystal ball, this is just my, just sort of known as CBTA, it could be the timing. We were pushing very hard to have this in due to that end user and what it was going to do to that intersection. But so we'll just have to keep our eyes on that to make sure that we don't slip, because I do have a meeting with Pam and Tony this week to talk about what they're potentially going to be doing moving forward, since they were the developer. There's a good chance. So we'll see what that looks like, but we just have to keep our eye on that ball from a timing perspective. But the funding is secured, it is there, it's been voted on. Right now, the only thing that could really change is when it happens.
Yeah, and to follow up on that, I had a hypothetical conversation with VDOT several months ago, just because we were looking at, obviously, when Project Rocky's rezoning application came through, their construction year was next year, was 2024, 2025 timeframe. As we kept seeing that probably become less and less likely, I had a conversation with them about the funding and the rezonings on the property. So that's all that was used for the scoring. Timing was not a factor. Even if they did come in 2035, the rezoning still is in effect. That traffic study that they did is actually what helped us also get the DDI. So that all of that information is still valid and very much a part of the scoring and the funding. So it was a conversation I know we had early on. About
So
that
if you can
funding.
just pause after each of these
Yeah,
items,
that's
just to
fine.
see if anybody has
That's
questions.
fine.
And if you don't mind, another
Yes.
question. We talk about the corridor study.
Yes.
So we had talked about the roads,
Ashland.
no, not, well, off of Ashland.
Oh, Bennington Way?
Yeah,
Oh,
thank you.
Bennington Road?
Yes. When is that kind of stuff gonna be addressed?
So my hope is that we can initially have those conversations as far as recommendations for that road and other roads, Rockville Road, Plaza Drive, on the December 20th meeting. I don't know for a fact if that, to what level we're going to discuss the corridor. I know it's mainly going to focus around the actual interchange design itself, but certainly the report that I indicated, the April 2024 timeframe, that report is going to be submitted to FHWA at that time, and that's going to include the entire corridor with all of the recommendations for the out year. I think we project out to 2044, 2045 in this IAR. So that will look at, okay, the Bennington Road intersection, what's going to happen with that? The Rockville Road intersection, as we look forward, what should happen there? So it's going to, the full report's going to have those recommendations for each intersection.
And when will it anticipate to be submitted to the federal highway?
So we're hoping April of 2024, and then the federal government's got to have their review process. I would expect if everything is kind of teed up for them to approve, we're looking at approval early to midsummer from the federal government. The good thing is, it's not going to impact our design engineering. It is. Fortunately, the IAR process is very formalized, and there are set timelines that they have to respond, and VDOT's got to respond, and so on. So that's at least a good thing. We're not just sending it into a black box of review timing. We do have to hold them to certain review timelines, and VDOT and the federal government on IARs have been very responsive back and forth that we've seen, both with the Gaten IAR Henrico County just went through for the Gaten Road interchange that they want to do, as well as some other ones. So we would expect, if everything is correct when we submit it, that we're looking at early to midsummer approval by the federal government. And then it's official that these are the recommendations for Ashland Road. But I'm hoping that we're going to get some initial recommendations on the Ashland corridor outside the interchange next week.
Okay.
So I can start to shape it and potentially have discussions with the new board about what do these various intersections look like, or at least recommended to look like coming out of that study.
So, assuming the federal government approves, we have our portion of the funding in place?
The funding is 100% secured for this project. It's just shy of, I think, $76 million is where we're at for the total interchange project. One thing that we're hoping to come out of the study, let's just, for discussion purposes, say there's a signal recommended at Rockville Road that specifically says, hey, there's no other improvement for this intersection at Rockville and Ashland, but we're going to need a traffic signal by the year 2045. We then take that recommendation and start looking for new money for that project moving forward. So that's why I'm hoping we get some good projects out of this study that we can then use in smart scale and revenue share and other pots of money that we can then start pulling some applications together. Yes, sir.
What is, you use the actual corridor, does that go from 250 all the way
That was my
down
next
to
question.
Highlands?
No, so it's currently, the scope of the project, I believe, on the northern end stops at the near business park or the industrial park there, but the southern end is Ashland, or excuse me, is Broad Street.
Well, and so when the corridor is north and south? of-
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And one more question, so they're moving the park and ride.
Yes.
You have stats on that?
That's on my
It's
next
not on
slide.
this. I just, because that was gonna be my question.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll beat each other up.
So I don't actually have that one on the slide. I do have a, just kind of general update on that. The estimate that was originally done, $7 million or so, just north of $7 million, was going to originally double the capacity we currently have. The existing park and ride, while small, has about 110, 112
Right.
some spaces,
Right.
depending on how you park, because it's not exactly a well-designed or delineated parking lot. The thought is now, because of what we're seeing across the board with projects and cost increases, that we're gonna phase the park and ride. So we're
Right.
going to,
Right.
there's gonna be what's called a bid option, so the contractor can submit for, hey, for $5 million, I can build phase one, which would be replacing in kind. So if we have 110 spaces, they're gonna put 110 spaces back. It's gonna have lighting, it's gonna be built to today's standards, and then have an option in the contract for, okay, well, if I go over the budget by this amount, I can do the whole project, which amounts to, I believe, 225 total spaces.
But that project is independent of the DDI. so
Correct, that is completely
It
independent.
just has nothing to
Yes.
do.
And separately funded, correct?
Correct, that was actually completely funded outside of Goochland's means. We had nothing to
Right,
do
that
with
was-
it. The state came in and picked our park and ride and another one in the state to fund separately from any interchange projects
Right.
or anything like that.
And we have a sense of a timeline on that?
So the construction is slated to begin in the 2026 timeframe, because the goal is to have that done prior to the interchange starting construction. Right, because what they want to do is use the existing park and ride as kind of a staging area. It's a perfect spot for the crews to park in the morning, for their vehicles to be out of the way. They don't have to build another parking lot, so to speak, for the construction crews, or for the trailers, or for everything that's associated with
Gotcha.
construction.
Good.
Yes, sir.
I'm not sure if this is appropriate, but just curious. Do you have any plans for charging stations? I mean, that's just,
There are no current plans for that in the park and ride.
just curious.
It's not a demand.
I ain't buying one yet.
Austin, still a 2-lane DDI?
No, it's gonna be a full-blown, we're adding a new bridge, so it's gonna be 4 lanes of traffic.
I mean, 2 in each direction, it's
Correct.
not a single lane, it's a double line.
Correct.
Okay.
So there'll be 2 lanes in each
And then
direction.
between now and.
Assuming that's what they come back with the recommendation.
Correct, that is the running assumption, that's what we asked for money. So the temporary measures were directly tied to the Rocky rezoning. So the temporary measures to date will be not installed unless another developer purchases that particular piece of property and abides by those particular
So
properties.
for the next 4 or 5 years, we just gotta live with what we got now.
To date, it will remain as is until we do fully build the interchange.
Wow, okay.
Yes.
They have approved the 2 stack warehouses somewhere adjacent to.
Correct.
I don't know, we have to do things for it, since it's not rocky, I guess, but does that not factor into the need for signalization or anything such as that?
No.
So as part of their traffic impact analysis, they took into account, because it still is approved, Rocky's temporary improvements. So they did not propose anything above and beyond Rocky's temporary profit improvements. But
Who is that?
the Crescent Group
Okay.
project, and that's the project that you're referring to.
Yes, sir.
So no, they did not propose any additional temporary signal improvements or anything like that on Ashland.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on Ashland?
Is that something that we could fund? We chose to, is that an option?
It certainly is an option we can discuss with VDOT. The hard part about having that conversation will be, we have a funded interchange improvement. To what degree will they consider maintaining, operating,
Yeah.
and potentially partially funding a temporary signal. Whereas if it's coming through private means, at the end of the day, if the private developer is willing to pay for something, and it is warranted today for that signal, it's the only way they were able to get it approved by VDOT. For the installation of that temporary signal, it has to be warranted, and it is. But because we have a fix, will VDOT be willing to spend the money, and will the state be willing to kick in any funds for that? It is another thing. It's certainly something that staff can discuss with VDOT.
I think
if that's something we want to do.
As we move, as Pantone figures out what they want to do moving forward,
Mhm.
I think that needs to be part of the discussions. How can we?
Right.
Okay.
You have the expertise in working with VDOT and managing them. At what point do we have too many requests for little things when we've gotten such a big win like the DDI? And I say this because I intentionally drive Ashland Road probably 4 times a week. In perspective, it is not a problem. Like, it raises a lot of concern, but if you compare it throughout the Commonwealth, especially our northern counties and jurisdictions, we have to say, this is 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes in the evening. At 10 a.m., you can drive through there, straight through, and it's not an issue. You know, what I worry about is VDOT going, oh my gosh, we just gave them $75 million, and you know, yet here is the next request for a signal, here's the next request for more signage, here's the next request for this little thing, versus, you know, toning it down, you know, being grateful for what we're receiving and moving forward. So I just want to put that out there.
And that's in the same light that my thoughts came that were, at the time when Rocky came through, the DDI was a hopefully to be funded project. So we had them propose, and it was warranted through their traffic study. It's not like we made them proffer anything that, or they offered to proffer anything that was beyond what the traffic warranted out there. That's where I think it does get tricky, where we're asking for temporary measures on something that will be fixed. I will say the queuing and the delays are pretty significant in the AM and the PM peak, where the traffic study by summer of next year anticipates it being over a mile back up heading south on Ashland Road, which is why we were pursuing a full fix now instead of kind of piecemealing it as originally intended. Was a single lane DDI, 1 lane in each direction, to kind of bridge the gap till we can fully fund. Yeah, you caught that.
Yeah.
Before we can fully fund a full new bridge with a 4-lane DDI. Well, with all the industrial traffic on Ashland Road, VDOT agreed that it just doesn't make sense to do a stopgap measure, because when that opened, it was going to be failing by the time we actually built it in the same time frame.
Right.
So why, let's just go ahead and seek the other 40 million now and build a new bridge and get the whole interchange fixed.
But the positive out of that, and I understand your question, it does seem like we have a lot. But you have to remember, several of our projects are VDOT requested. So the 288 hard shoulder running lanes, that wasn't anything Goochland wanted.
Okay.
VDOT wanted to use those technology funds. So yes, we do have a lot going on. It's not all just pushed by Goochland.
Good.
So I think it's appropriate for us to go after this signal.
Yeah, I think the state and Fed get involved when the exit backs up onto the interstate, where you've got
Yeah.
a parking lot on the interstate where people are going 70.
Yep.
Right.
That's just not a good mix, but that's up to them to say, yeah, that's a safety hazard.
Yep.
And just for, because we talked about the single lane DDI, which was originally, that was already approved before Rocky was even mentioned, before he even started training. So we, they have, they've already acknowledged that this is a problem, so that they know, and with the increases in traffic. So we just need to keep our eye on it.
So is that it sounds like it's a conversation you want me to at least initially broach with the folks
Let's talk
that I talked to?
Let's work, let's see what the developers
Okay.
thinking, and throw us time, and then we'll coordinate together.
Okay. No, that sounds good.
Thanks.
So the next project we have going on is the Fairground Road extension. Obviously, the roundabout is not quite yet closed out. The stub road to the back of Taylor's is still remains closed. VDOT's working on buttoning up a couple issues, and I know that will be open hopefully in the next few months for safer traffic, although all they can access at this point is the back of Taylor's. But the Fairground Road extension project is continuing that road stub all the way to Route 6. I mentioned it before, it will pop out on Route 6 just west of the mobile home park entrance. So it'll be on the high school side of that mobile home park entrance is where that will come out, and there will be a left and, I believe a right turn lane installed as well. I know definitively there will be a left turn lane installed on Route 6 for the extension project. We did have a design public hearing on November 16th here at 250. The turnout was small, but it was kind of expected by VDOT. In those types of, I'll say, non-controversial projects, the public typically doesn't ever turn out in great numbers. I think there were 7 or 10 citizens that did show up, which equaled the amount of total staff between VDOT and the county that was there. But I think it was very productive. We had some additional conversations with VDOT about this project and others. The design will now, because the board will approve the funding for the additional sidewalk, we'll have sidewalk on both sides of that road to kind of promote pedestrian connectivity there. And some of the conversations we've had about farmers market and promoting some of that business growth along that new road. And construction for that is scheduled to start in 2026. Any questions on the extension project?
I do. So we just approved the sidewalks.
Correct.
Last meeting. So now on the extension, be sidewalks on both sides.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct.
So that takes you, the sidewalks would take you from Route 6 around through the roundabout,
Mhm.
then presumably to the farmer's market, the library, whatever.
Correct,
Right? To the
correct.
courthouse.
Correct.
So I'm just trying to envision how that works with pedestrians trying to cross in a roundabout. I just don't know how it works. So I think of a traffic light, you know, they got the push button, you stop the traffic, you know, people can walk through.
Right.
How does that work with a roundabout?
So the roundabout as is installed right now does have 4 crosswalks, 1 on each leg.
Right.
They are unsignalized.
I understand. Well, that's the hope.
Right,
Right.
right.
But
So
how do
it
you
is,
stop traffic?
it will be up to the drivers to follow state law and yield to pedestrians that are in crosswalks. That's how unsignalized crosswalks operate across the Commonwealth. The drivers have to yield to pedestrians.
They give you reflective vests and set you out there?
Is there a sign?
I don't believe there's a
Crosswalk?
sign for that.
I mean, that's one of the things that I presume we could ask for, right? That the yield to pedestrians and crosswalk signs.
I'll have to double check what signage is.
Well, I don't know, I mean, I don't know, I'm just trying to envision how it really works, because the whole idea of a roundabout is you keep moving,
Right.
right? So
We have pedestrians in the mix and all
over
of a
here,
sudden.
we run this way, and there's somebody back here trying to cross.
Mhm.
I guess maybe I've passed them, so maybe it's okay. I don't know, I'm just trying to envision how it actually works.
The hope is everybody will follow the law and yield to the appropriate party.
Well, there
whether
you
it's-
go. You know, follow the law. There you go.
I'd like to think everybody's got,
Okay.
everybody's always gonna follow the law, but, that's certainly the hope, Tara, in that always perfect scenario.
That's what we do.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting we do anything, it's just,
Okay.
it's just a conundrum, to me, it's just trying to envision how it
I
actually does
understand,
work.
roundabouts installed. to keep
Especially
those
with maybe
moving.
a lot of,
Right.
I hate to say it, like kids, high schoolers, you know, sprinting across there, whatever.
Yeah. I know it's not the extension, but you mentioned the roundabout and completion.
Yes.
We'd spoken quite deliberately about upon completion, getting it so the county can maintain and
Yes.
figure out what has to happen
Yes.
there. Is that still moving forward, or is?
That is still, it has positive momentum. It's on a holding pattern at the moment because we can't file a permit to do any kind of landscaping or maintenance. We have to request to do maintenance in the middle of the roundabout
Right.
because it's VDOT right away.
Right.
We can't do that till the project's officially closed.
But we can figure out what we want to do once we have that permit. So we can be figuring out, do we want citizens engaged in designing what that is? Do we want, is it just gonna be county staff? Like how, what we can just, like we could be working to know what we want there prior to that. So that would be my
So
hope.
to date, we haven't had any conversations about what is going to go in there. I've received a lot of unsolicited calls about what should go in the middle of the roundabout. A lot of great ideas, some maybe not so great ideas. I certainly would think it would be a good idea for us prior to closeout to at least have some of those initial conversations.
Or just get the plan to get to the
Right.
plan. That would be my hope.
Well, the roundabout at 522 and 250 is landscaped.
Correct.
Who paid for that and who maintains that?
So I can't answer the question as far as who paid for it. My assumption is it was partially paid likely by the state and Louisa County. I don't know exactly how
Can we
that
find
project was
out?
fully funded. I can certainly find out.
Yeah.
I
Because,
know that.
To me, that's totally fine. It's got some low
simple
shrubs, low
landscaping.
stuff.
They don't want low. They want higher stuff.
Believe it or not,
Go ahead,
Right.
Austin, you can say
But-
it.
Why
Believe
would
it or
you wanna
not,
do that?
Let's just tell you right now.
Distracting.
VDOT wants, in the middle of a roundabout, you to look left, not straight. Typically at an intersection, you look all four ways, but in a roundabout, there's only one way to look. That's where traffic's coming from.
Right.
So to make you look left, they would actually prefer in the middle of a roundabout something to block your sight from looking forward, which sounds really counterintuitive. Normally, you don't want anything in the way at any intersection ever. But in a roundabout, they want, not that they're going to mandate we put a 13-foot tall statue of somebody or whatever in the middle of it.
I mean, Manny's willing.
Maybe it's willing, but they would prefer if they wouldn't say no if we were to come in and say we would like to put a large flowering tree in the middle and it's going to block sight directly ahead. Because at the end of the day, that's not where your conflict is coming from. It's actually coming from the left.
Right.
I just don't want it to be a project bigger than it is.
Right. And I
mean, people
certainly
want all this elaborate, it needs to be simple and easy to maintain.
And I think that's the intent. We don't have irrigation installed in the center, so it's not anything that
Exactly. Who's gonna
we're
do all
anticipating
this?
having irrigation for. I don't know the answer to that question as far as long-term maintenance. I believe that the one in Louisa County at 522, and I'm happy to confirm this, that Louisa and/or community would maintain it because VDOT's not in the habit of maintaining landscaping. I believe there's either a private group or the county's partially involved as far as the Centerville landscaping. I would anticipate it being a similar arrangement, whether it's partially
You can
county
cement
maintained
it
or
over
private
and there's no
group.
maintenance.
What was that?
You can cement it over and it's no maintenance.
There is always that option.
Just saying.
It sounds like there's a couple of different perspectives we're hearing from board members about who ought to be involved in that decision.
We gotta nix these big projects and these, a whole committee. I think that's nuts. It's a simple little tiny roundabout.
Go ahead.
Question on the extension, you've got sidewalks on both sides. What kind of development are we gonna encourage? Are we gonna light that up like a town, a village?
So it is going to have similar street lights to both the roundabout and the courthouse, what I call courthouse proper, on Route 6, 522.
We have opportunity to encourage some village-type development.
And that's the intent. At the public hearing,
Absolutely, yeah, we talk about
at the
that.
public hearing, we did have some initial concepts of what that may look like as far as form and feel. It was very village-centric, similar styles to what we have now, very brick, very, almost called formal, where that's how the courthouse village feels.
Is that baked into the village plan as we have it now?
To a certain degree, I know economic development is working on kind of furthering those concepts on the extension.
To include that?
Right, and I think, and I know Mr. Spooner, I think you've been involved to that to a certain degree, that we're continuing to further that conversation as far as what do we want there and getting a business strategy, so to speak, as far as what to attract to that area, what makes sense to bring to a setting such as that, and to kind of incorporate what we want. It talks about the farmer's market and so on, what businesses are complementary to that use. So I think that's something that's very much underway with that development.
It's commercial
There was a
business.
study done with a video that we can send you the link to that shows sort of high level and kind of sort of what was presented at the public hearing that had. It's kind of exciting.
You guys already know about all this stuff.
We're learning.
Any other questions on the extension? All right. So the next one we've got going on is the Hockett Road realignment. The first major piece of that, I know that came up quite frequently and early, was the existing signal at Hockett and St. Matthews. And I know I touched on it at the last Board of Supervisors public hearing, but wanted to mention it again, that in the application for funding and in the initial concepts, it was recommended that that signal would likely need to be removed at existing Hockett, St. Matthews, and Broad Street. Under further review and doing additional analysis with VDOT, it is looking more and more likely, waiting on the official word, but that signal will likely remain, and it's anticipated to remain. So that's one thing that we're waiting kind of on the official findings, we're waiting on getting the sign off. But in my conversations with traffic engineering, the folks that are doing that analysis as a part of the project, it's all but done at this point. So the analysis has been done, it's got to go through the proper approval channels, but we certainly anticipate now that signal is expected to remain.
Since we have some of our prospective board members here, can you step back and talk about what the Hackett Road realignment project is?
Happy to.
Just to, bring
I
everybody a
think
little
So
up to speed.
the Hockett Road realignment, we're putting a single lane roundabout on existing Hockett Road, just north of Holly Lane and south of the emergency vet. And we're bringing what we're calling New Hockett Road, at least conceptually now, it's probably gonna be named Ashland Road, through the empty field that the Pruitt's own, and bring it to the signal at the Wells Fargo. So that's gonna be a four-legged intersection. It was built to receive that road, 2010 when Broad Street was wide, in 2011, that time frame. So we're finally gonna utilize and then the signal pole's waiting on it. It's waiting on signal heads. It's been installed since then. So we're finally hopefully gonna be utilizing that infrastructure now.
Pruitts are aware of this.
Oh, yeah. Had many conversations with them.
VDOT has the right of way?
What was that?
The VDOT has the right of way?
Not yet. That is a phase that will hopefully be occurring in the next year or so. Right now, we're going through the initial design, and once we get to about 30% design, it's my understanding to have those conversations with the landowners. I know there's a couple buildings that will have to be removed. The three little buildings on Hockett Road just north of Holly Lane, I believe at least two of them are going to be impacted, so we'll have the conversations with all the appropriate landowners. Any other questions on Hockett Road?
Yeah, it looks like and again, I know there's a lot of factors that go into the timing of this, so
Yes.
these are all kind of estimates at this point. But we're talking about the Hockett Road realignment being in 28, as well as the Diamond on
Yes.
Ashland Road. So I'm thinking about traffic, and I'm traveling through that corridor, I'm going through two major construction zones at the same time. Is there any thought about how you stage this stuff in? I see that being like
Right.
pretty messy.
Ashland Road will likely see a lot of improvements over the next 10 to 15 years, not only from our projects, and I would anticipate coming out of the study, there's gonna be more projects that we're probably gonna want to pursue on Ashland Road, but also the development.
I'm talking about the Diamond.
Right.
Going on at the same construction as Hockett.
So we haven't had those conversations yet as far as, and I think really that's a factor of, we chased money for both projects at the exact same time, and they were fully funded in the exact same fiscal
Right.
year, so they were gonna follow the same schedule. It's certainly nothing that was, oh, hey, I have an idea, let's do major construction on both ends of Ashland Road. That could be a conversation we'll have with them as far as maintenance of traffic and making sure that we do keep smooth operations.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting
Married
pushing
the two.
anything
Right.
later, but
I think there's a way to phase or marry the two projects, so to speak, so we maintain traffic flow.
Yeah, I think.
I'm just putting it out there, that's
No,
all.
I think it's good because, you've got a lot of non-public, you have a whole bridge that you have to build that doesn't impact traffic whatsoever. And then you've got
Right.
all the way up to the roundabout that doesn't impact traffic. So as long as you coordinate those two, that when you're not touching current roads, you could be
Right.
working on.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, I mean, I'm just saying, it's
No, that's
just
a good point.
something to coordinate those so you're not running our citizens
Right.
through two major construction zones in the same.
And that's a conversation I'll make sure to have with VDOT because
That's
we
all.
don't want, while a lot of the project staff on VDOT's side are similar between the two projects, we don't want both of them to become siloed. That, hey, we're gonna completely, worst case scenario,
So not
shut down
like-
Ashland and Broad to do this and then also shut down the
That's all.
interchange. Well, then our citizens have nowhere to go.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
we-
that's all.
No, I understand.
And the fire down the road, so
Right,
careful
we're-
about that.
I think one of the lessons learned out of the
The emergency
roundabout was
services.
emergency services and coordinating with them. That's something that we're gonna be taking a hard look at through any project, whether there's major detours involved, or lane closures, flagging operations. We wanna make sure emergency services is very much in the loop on that and a part of that conversation to make sure that their operations stay very much intact.
Following up on Neil's question, it's fair to say that a lot of the Hockett Road realignment construction is off the existing thoroughfares.
That's correct.
Yeah. But that's just a consistent message, I would think.
The bridge, no, that, and to Mr. Spooner's point earlier, that the DDI, the bridge is gonna take, that's gonna be a brunt of the initial traffic. And frankly, building that first, that's the current thought and concept on timing is building the bridge first will also allow for smoother maintenance, because then you can move people as you need back and forth.
Right, yeah,
Between the two
right,
bridges.
you can alternate, yes.
So that's something that, but those are conversations that we'll make sure to have, to make sure that the two projects can one another.
Go ahead.
Cross that bridge when you come to it.
Seem to be on the right road there.
Need to show the road there.
So the Oldville Road I-64 westbound ramp roundabout is another one of our projects that Houston County's gonna see a lot of construction, public construction over the next several years, and this is another one that's gonna be somewhat major construction. We are putting a single lane roundabout at the top of the westbound off-ramp at Oldville Road, which is something that is desperately needed because in the PMP, the traffic queuing on the 64 is extremely dangerous. Having grown up off that exit, I am shocked to date how nobody's gotten killed and rear-ended at 75 miles an hour, 80 miles an hour on I-64. It is shocking. So that's something that we worked with both the federal government getting a grant through the community project program. I forget the full name of it now, but we were able to secure $4 million for that through the U.S. House of Representatives Appropriations Committee, which is great. And then we are currently tracking the rest of that through revenue sharing, which is a 50-50 split. We're anticipating being on the hook for another $1.2-ish million, $1.1 million to finish out that project. I'll touch on the funding a little bit more in a few slides. But the design is currently underway, even though we're not fully funded on that, because the federal dollars have to be spent or earmarked and allocated by October of 2026. So VDOT was not going to wait on us securing the additional funding. If we get to a point where there's no funding and we have gone through full design, we'll punt that and kick that can down the road, so to speak, and kind of figure out what's going to happen at that point. But because the federal funds have that timeline, VDOT and county staff, we agreed to just move forward with design and have these conversations at a later date. But we are hopeful that it's going to be a successful application because of our relative low ask of just north of $1 million through revenue share. Yes, sir.
You used the term, it's going to be signalized, you said?
No, it's going to be a single lane roundabout.
Single lane, okay. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so and we are very much currently on track, and a big piece of that construction timeline is there's no right-of-way phase because the right-of-way there is already significantly large at the interchange. We're not anticipating any right-of-way needs there, so that actually saves about 12 or so months off that process. Any questions on Oldville? Okay. So, big chart, don't expect this entire thing to be absorbed. I wanted to highlight a few pieces of this. So this is the Goochland County 6-year plan that if we have dollars associated with a project, I've created the spreadsheet to kind of track that and all of our projects that are moving forward. So this doesn't include anything maintenance related or doesn't include every project that VDOT's got in their 6-year plan. They're tracking kind of the smaller projects, some of the older projects. I'm not tracking things like studies or anything like that. This is kind of the big ticket item, so to speak. The one key thing I wanted to point out, let's go ahead and get the laser pointer here, is Goochland County's got over $100 million of active construction projects to date, which is, I think, outstanding. If you look at some of our neighbors, they are in and around that same number, $100 or so million worth of transportation projects, yet we're a quarter of the size of a lot of those counties, and we're a lot smaller than a lot of those counties. So the emphasis that the board has put in years past and to date on transportation, I think, is how we've gotten here. I hope we continue to fill up this spreadsheet. You can see at the bottom the different funding sources. There's 12 or so, 15 funding sources that we have to navigate for each project, which is very complicated. But it's we've had a lot of success in the past. That's the purpose of this, is to visually provide an update for the board, kind of where projects are funding-wise, where the estimates are. The only one that remains unfunded is the Oldville Road interchange, as I just mentioned. We are chasing the rest of those dollars currently, hoping that that's going to be a successful application. But to really highlight that we've been very successful, and I certainly hope that we continue that trend.
So these are committed funds?
Correct.
They-
These are committed funds either locally, state, or federally.
Go back to a minute ago, you said you all decided to move forward because you had federal funding for that project, and then we would come up with the 1.1 million and 1.2 million.
Correct.
You felt a level of comfort in that you could get it at the time. And so what makes you feel comfortable on that? And is that something the board gets involved in? I mean, we just trust you to come up with that money and we don't write a blank check?
So the board did endorse.
I'm just
Right,
curious.
no, I
I
understand.
think it's a great decision.
So as part of any application, whether it's, I'll go through a few of the pots, revenue share, transportation alternatives, smart scale, any funding pot, state, federal dollars, we need board concurrence, so to speak, a resolution of support for the application. The board did provide that for the revenue share application, and part of that was acknowledging that we have the money currently, we're proceeding with design, yet we're still seeking this additional $1.1, $1.2 million moving forward. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
But that is unusual. I mean,
It
that-
is.
Usually VDOT won't get us to approve any project unless it's.
Unless
Money's
they-
there, right.
everybody feels comfortable.
The difference here is that federal timing requirement. So in the conversations with VDOT, revenue share, that particular pot of money, there's a sweet spot for every pot where if your ask is in that sweet spot, you're more than likely going to get the funds. And roundabouts are also the flavor of the month, so to speak, with safety corridors and where projects are. We see a lot of roundabouts getting funded, so.
I used to be against the roundabout for some reason, because I guess I don't like change, but I think they're great. I sat there at this one 2 weeks ago and saw a full-size tractor trailer truck negotiate around that thing. And I said, I don't think he's gonna make it, but he did, and, that bodes well for our firefighters and all that,
So just to
So
give
it
you.
really worked.
So I love your question, Tom. Just to give you context of how some history of how this came about. I think it was maybe Thursday or Friday afternoon, we get a call from our delegate in Congress saying, hey, do you have any projects you want funded? And we had like 24 hours to get it together. Luckily, Austin's here and he has a list and knows what our priorities are, sent it off. It got completely left off the first round and then it got picked up in the second round. And then like, okay, we're gonna give you the money, but we don't know what the rules are. So then they changed the rules, and we didn't even know it was a project match. So it was either we lose the 4 million and sort of hedge our bets that we can come up with the 1.2, and even if we don't get the revenue share, then this board gets involved and say, okay, well, we've got CVTA local funds that we can use towards it. There's other funding sources. To answer your question, though, gives me a question for Austin of what can the board be doing? I know with the DDI. Economic development, and your team did a great job. We got letters from all of our leaders, our Congress folks, business owners in support. Do you know if with the revenue share there's a public input, like in a prioritization that we should or could be engaging businesses, citizens, and our legislators?
So it's not quite the same process as Smart Scale. Smart Scale is its own beast, so to speak, with all of the different types of input. I actually found out yesterday that both revenue share and the Transportation Alternatives Program funding timelines are the exact same. We'll find out the initial scoring and funding scenarios in the February timeframe. So we're expecting sometime in February to find out if we scored well or not. To my knowledge, there still is that time between February and June when VDOT releases their draft 6-year plan, which would include dollars for the projects that were successful through these pots. That in that time frame, February to June, we certainly could continue to have those conversations, much like we did through Smart Scale. I am confident that it will be a successful application, but you do never know. I know we were ready with the Ashland Road piece because we were asking for $42 million through Smart Scale and probably didn't think, at least empirically, it would be successful. So we knew we kind of had to have that ready, but I think it would certainly be a good idea to be prepared to have those conversations as well.
And the other comment I'll make is going back to your point, Austin, about the 103 million. So to Charlie's kind of comment earlier, and I think it's going to be important for our board to realize the importance of the relationship with VDOT going forward. And there's two factors of this. Since Austin's come on board, we've made leaps and bounds in transportation. Austin's position wasn't funded until 2021.
There was one predecessor before me, I think it was 2019,
Okay,
2020. It came about in COVID.
So the point is, one of the things we're considering is administering our own projects. So the sidewalk project over here is our first attempt at that. But if we're not administering our projects, or even if we are, the relationship with VDOT is critical. When I got on the board, because of some divisions where people backed out, we were kind of trying to build roads because of cost overruns. The relationship was, let's say, because we're on camera, strained at best. We've worked really, really, really hard to get it to I think we've got a great relationship with VDOT, especially compared to other localities. So it's going to be critical for us as a board to continue to engage. So we have our meetings we have a quarterly meeting with VDOT now that we didn't have before. So we all get together, we talk about what's going on. But attendance and support of those to show that we are supportive and we want to be good customers is going to be critical.
Any other questions just on these projects as a whole?
Also that, here's just look at the big picture here. So you got 103, of the 103, 76 is the big one, DBI. And then the rest of them are totaled up around 25 million or so, plus or minus. But for the new board and for us, funding sources, If I look at the funding sources, the top one, general fund is local, the bottom one, CBTA local is local. So the county's taking in about $4.5 million out of 103 million worth of projects. So we're getting pretty good leverage on our dollar. Again, the vast majority is going to that one project, but there's a lot of money around that, but we're still getting our local contributions fairly modest. And again, kudos to Austin for being able to access all those other pockets of money that are outside of jurisdictions. So, thank you, Austin.
Yeah, we are hoping, and the next slide will I'm hoping to fill in this spreadsheet, maybe not the whole thing, because it's quite a few rows, but Houston County is, I think, going to have a lot of transportation and construction in the next 10 to 20 years. And that's certainly, we've got a lot of priorities. The big ticket items that have been priorities for a number of years, Hockett, Ashland Road, Oldville, the Fairground Extension Project, we're slowly knocking some of these off, and we're actually at a point where the consultant we brought on board for Smart Scale is helping us, and I'll flip to the next slide now, this is looking forward for our future applications or planned applications, but the consultant we have on board for the Smart Scale application assistance is also looking at, I've given them our priority list that I kind of just have internally, old CIP list that we have for transportation projects, and saying what projects are good fits for what funding pots. So we're almost going to revamp our priority list, getting a third party to take a look at my version of the priority list to see, am I on track here, what corrections need to be made, and so on. But we are at a good point with a problem that we're running out of big ticket items, which is good. But that means we have to do the work to then backfill and do a lot more due diligence on the projects that have been around for quite some time but we've gone nowhere. Three Chop Road reconnection is one of our last, quote unquote, big ticket items that's going to be very expensive to do. Yeah, so the Three Chop Road reconnection is really, it's just that, where 288 was built and disconnected Three Chopped and
Chopped it,
Short Pump
in
area. In the east end of the county, where Drive Shack is. So Three Chop Road used to, it currently cul-de-sacs coming off of Ashland Road all the way to 288. It used to go through there, go where Drive Shack is, and come to in and around the area where the signal at Wawa is. That's about where Three Chop Road used to end. So we are really trying to tunnel under 288, as cumbersome as that sounds, and it sounds expensive, and it is. To tunnel under 288 and reconnect to Three Chop Road would open up 500 to 700 acres for future economic development as per the current comp plan. So that is something that we are really anticipating and looking forward to doing. I know economic development is asking when can we get that funded, because that opens up a lot of opportunities in currently planned economic development areas. But again, that's what the consultant really, yes, we brought them on board to help us with smart scale applications, to do a lot of that due diligence, but I'm more excited about the future outlook because I've planned on applications through 2025. We've gone through the 2023 cycle. The next ones that I've circled are the 2024 cycle, where I've planned on having these applications ready for those two pots, which are the only two pots next year. But then when we get to 2026, 2027, 2028, as we start building this out 1 year at a time, that's what I'm expecting to get back from that consultant is, what are we looking at? What projects are eligible for what pots? We've got smaller projects like Hardwell Road and Broad. That's been a priority for some time that I have a feeling I know what pots it's going to be available for, but what's the true cost of that? What is, with all the things that costs have gone through recently. So hoping to get some really good data back from our consultant on that, and hopefully we'll start filling this out, and instead of a 3-year cycle, we'll have a 6-year plan or a 5-year outlook on applications for the future.
Well, so you got a couple of acronyms up there, maybe some of the new folks. Can you kind of go through all the acronyms?
Absolutely. So SGR is called the State of Good Repair. It is a mostly bridge-related funding program. It is one that used to have an application cycle, but actually doesn't anymore. What VDOT does is they look at all the bridges in the Commonwealth or by district, and they determine which ones are, through an inspection process, structurally deficient is the phrase, I believe that's used. We have one structurally deficient bridge in the county, it's Whitehall Road, over Whitehall Creek. And VDOT did submit that for funding, because like I said, they now pick and choose which bridges go into the funding program. They have conversations with us, and we did say, we would like Whitehall Road to be submitted, please. And they did do that for us. It did not score. So now we're trying to figure out other avenues to get that funded, because I know that's a significant impact to fire response times because of the weight limit on that bridge, and it is currently structurally deficient.
Your process of deciding these projects and prioritizing them, so forth. I'm sure it's multifaceted based on funding and VDOT and everything.
Correct.
But I mean, how do you, do the citizens input on this?
So,
How do you?
from a broad, from a broad
You have a
standpoint,
plan.
we, and I'll flip to the next slide real quick, it's got some of the acronyms, but not all of them. The three regional bodies on top, Plan RVA, RRTPO, or the Richmond Regional Transportation Planning Organization, and then CVTA, have two documents, so to speak, the Long Range Transportation Plan and the Transportation Improvement Program. So those are planning level documents that say transportation priorities moving forward. It's something that I know we were very much involved in, and Mr. Lumpkins was involved in through the RRTPO with their long range transportation plan. They're currently getting ready to rewrite that, even though we just finished. It's such a long process. Once you finish, you start rewriting it. We'll certainly want to be heavily involved in that again. And then we have our major thoroughfare plan. We have our comprehensive plans that dictate and recommend various transportation projects. The Hockett Road realignment, my understanding, was a comprehensive plan recommendation years ago, several years ago, and we've moved that forward. And those are the types of documents we actually have to prove we need the project. We can't say, VDOT, I'd sure like $5 million to put a signal here. They're gonna say, well, why? Where's your need? Where's the data? Where's your study?
Right.
So we're always looking to do those studies. There's broad regional studies that have public input options, and then we have the local studies, like I mentioned, the major thoroughfare plan and the comp plan, where those recommendations are more granular, Guzman County specific, and do get a lot of that citizen feedback.
So to kind of, to make it real for on our side of the table, you're gonna get input from citizens, you're gonna get staff recommendations, staff's gonna look and say, hey, here's what we think we can go after. At the end of the day, the board helps staff prioritize what the order of the list is. And, but it really comes heavily with staff input, and because the process is gonna explain, well, we can go for this, but here's why we don't think it's gonna score well. So there's influence, but at the end of the day, it comes up to the board to kind of decide what the priorities are and what you have to.
Yeah, and just to dovetail on that, one of the documents, or one of the ways, for me anyway, to figure out priorities is to go to the sheriff's department, get a list of the accidents, and see where the most dangerous intersections are, and then have that top 10 list, and try to address the top ones so that it goes away, then everything moves up, and so you're addressing your public safety, which is number one. The second one is inconvenience. 288 backs up for miles and miles, and that's nobody's, best friend. So VDOT does like to keep traffic moving.
Also-
So there's public safety, and then there's the gridlock aspect. So those are good.
Also, the economic development aspect. It seems to me because
See, help me with this.
You
but
look at that
if you go to
Ridgetop extension, it opens up 500 acres of.
VDOT, help me with this. VDOT will
They
not
don't do that?
will not approve funds.
They do in certain pods. Smart scale is very forward thinking more than some of the other pods. Revenue share is really simple. It's most of the time the projects are, unless it's exorbitantly expensive, because there's a $10 million cap on revenue share. If you have the cash, if you have your 50%, chances are they're going to give you their 50%. So you can pretty much, that's almost a spend it on whatever you want kind of pot. Smart scale is very future. They're trying to make it even more so now, future looking, and looking at future congestion, future economic development potential. So that is, all the various pods kind of look at different things. Transportation alternatives is just that. It's looking at bike ped facilities, recreational transportation facilities like trails, bikeways, sidewalk improvements. So those are very niche projects that aren't going to have the same benefits for even congestion or accidents or anything like that. It's about filling gaps on sidewalks or providing recreation.
You
Go
want
ahead.
right, and so much of that is, you're absolutely right, and you have to look at who's at the top, the current administration, right? So the previous administration, all bike paths, walking trails. Current administration, very, very focused. Safety's number one, economic development is number two. Our governor doesn't like to keep losing to North Carolina.
And we do have to keep it mindful of the regional.
Absolutely, 100%.
Right.
100%, absolutely.
Okay, so I just love the idea that the staff comes to the board with a recommendation, but we don't on zoning cases. So it's interesting.
Okay.
And so I think you heard is that the need for projects and the warrant of projects is going to be staff, but then the prioritization is where the board has real impact and would of course take into account things that how it's impacting your citizens, whether that's by data or what people are telling them.
Right, we had a lot of those conversations over the last several workshops that kind of how we got here. That staff came forward with a list, and I believe something similar to this, and we had a discussion as far as what projects make sense, what are the priorities, but then I think Mr. Spinelli touched on it a few minutes ago, that one of the key things is also what project is eligible for what pot of money.
Exactly.
So if-
What's their time frame? Yeah.
Right, so if we have a project that's priority number one, take Ashland Road, it's a $76 million project, we're not going through revenue share. It's not a transportation alternative because it's not a bike path. There's really no other pot but one, it's smart scale, or we somehow come up with $80 million on our own and write a check. So when you take that into account as well, it changes this because the Route 288 southbound auxiliary lane, which is near the bottom here for revenue share and CBTA, it's going to be expensive. Anything on Route 288 is going to be expensive. It's a freeway. We're talking about significant construction costs and so on. Are the Route 288 projects, less important than widening or doing Fairground Road and Hawktown Road? Probably not. But it's about what pot it's eligible for and how they fall, because not every pot's every year. CBTA is every other year. Smart Scale is every other year. TBO is one of the few that is every year.
So it's the potential benefit times the probability of success.
Well,
Does that help?
it allows us to temper expectations too, because the high priority projects, people want to see go to the very front, and we have to say, that's just not feasible
A lot of
in,
factors go into that.
next 24 months, but it's on the radar, it's not gonna get obscured or lost.
And that's something that I'm always not tweaking or changing the priority list, but I've used this phrase before, and it came up a lot with both the Project Rocky rezoning and then through a couple other conversations we've had recently with some developers, that we're always one rezoning case away from having a new transportation priority. If the Ashland Road DDI was a priority, but it became the only priority once Project Rocky was approved by the board. And that was kind of part of the conversation through the rezoning process, is we have to focus all of our efforts on getting this one project funded, and we were successful in doing that. That became, we didn't kick everything else aside, but that was a lot of the focus. I know staff, myself included, spent quite a lot of time on having the conversations with the CTP member and pulling all of the data that he requested together to get that funding. So it is always fluid. It's somewhat rigid in that we know what our priority lists are, but like we are one rezoning case or one major really incident from changing the narrative and saying, hey, look, all of a sudden Cardwell and Broad top of the list because we've had 30 accidents this year, and for whatever reason, it's now a completely dangerous intersection. Well, that's on the list, but it could be number 8. But we're always one instance or one scenario from changing the list kind of overnight, so to speak.
Well, so I don't see the Tuckahoe Bridge there.
It is a priority that the door is not closed on that. That is one thing that I keep having a conversation with VDOT on, and it's not closed.
You said a bridge?
Explain that project.
From Good.
You want to explain that project?
Goochland- So Goochland County's had a long plan to, and this was kind of conceptualized, I think even when 288 was designed, that Ridgefield Parkway and Henrico County, where it dead ends at Tuckahoe Creek, would connect to Tuckahoe Creek Parkway. Tuckahoe Creek Parkway was, when it was first designed, Ridgefield Parkway. It was an extension of Ridgefield Parkway. That's what it was supposed to be named, looking at the 1995 plans, I think that Timmons did, as a part of the Kinlock development. It was Ridgefield Parkway. So there were various things that led to us not making that connection, mostly political. And that board member is no longer with Henrico County. She decided to retire. That I'm hoping there's some new conversations to be had there, because it is, I believe, in everybody's best interest. I know VDOT wants it to happen, Goochland County wants it to happen. It opens up a lot of opportunities for us. There are some concerns.
Henrico now wants it to happen?
Well, I mean,
They haven't said that.
They're not going that far.
No, not even.
But a lot of the hurdles are slowly getting removed to that, I think.
Right.
I mean, there's the emergency room in Goochland that could very well become a full-blown hospital if the need was there. And just across that gap, there's 4 or 5 nursing homes. And when they have cardiovascular events or stroke outs, they have to go all the way around to get to that emergency room. It's a half an hour versus 2 minutes. You could save an awful lot of lives potentially from that. That hospital would probably, in short order, appear if there was that kind of a need and the rooftops were there. That's part of the justification. We have done surveys in the past. Turns out citizens on both sides would like it. Turns out the businesses on both sides would like it. It turns out the politicians on one side would like it. And VDOT will not build a bridge between two jurisdictions unless both jurisdictions are on board. So that's where it stands.
And to add to the complexity of it is VDOT won't build the bridge because it's between two jurisdictions, but specifically because Henrico County maintains their own roads. So
That's right.
Ridgefield Parkway is not a VDOT maintained road. It's not a VDOT facility. It's an Henrico County facility. So there's also, and it will be complex. It's not going to be a simple project by any means. We're not just going to build a bridge and walk away. There's all kinds of signal retimings. There's impacts to Ridgefield Parkway, Pump Road, Lauderdale, all of those roads in Henrico. That's a fact.
Now, in the meantime, a lot of that traffic that has to go out and around is being dumped on Broad and 6.
Right.
And there's requests from those jurisdictions to widen those roads to accommodate all the increase in traffic that's caused by going, if you build the
To
bridge.
fix it, exactly.
Yeah.
There have
Exactly
been
right.
That's some logic for you.
Now you know what you need to know.
there have been numerous studies conducted by both VDOT and Henrico County that recommend that connection. To date, it has not happened. That's the official answer. But yeah, there's a lot of reasons why it hasn't, but I think the door's not shut, and it's certainly Houston County want and desire.
And we have 4 out of 5 new in Henrico.
Yeah, there's been some turnover on boards.
Yeah.
That's probably a prerequisite to this. I was chair of the PDC, which is now Plan RVA, whatever it is, and there was some money 4 years out to do a study to see if it made sense. And the motion was made by one of the other jurisdictions to remove that money because they didn't want to know if it
They
made
didn't want the
sense.
study, right.
And they said if you build it, it's going to be a high arching bridge, it would ruin the visualscape, unlike the Route 6 bridge over Tucko Creek, which is perfectly flat. And they said, but if you build it, 40,000 vehicles will use that thing, it'll just be, so you're telling me the citizens want that bridge? Is that, it just, anyway, we had a lot of fun with it back then, but I just wanted to see if it just stays out there.
It is.
But we
in one of the
funded the
footnotes.
study.
Sorry?
We
Oh,
funded,
we personally,
funded,
well,
when they said no, we funded it. We did the study.
And like I said, Henrico's funded their own studies that also recommend this. A Broad Street corridor study recommended it. The Gate Road interchange study recommended it.
And some of the 10,000,
relationship with the board of supervisors and like that, don't
we
we? Need to develop them.
And part of the 10,000 people who go to work in West Creek, most of them at Cap One or Carmax, but live across that and could go home 5 minutes for lunch and come back instead of going all the way around. Your whole lunch hour is spent on the road. So the businesses there would, anyway, that's enough of that. Just as long as we keep it on the
Yep.
list.
It is on the priority list, but it is not, it's kind of in the grayed out area that it doesn't make anything on print because it's on the list, but it's not anything that we're expecting to be realistic at least anytime soon currently. But you never know. There could be new sentiment tomorrow with new board members getting sworn in Henrico County and boom, we have a new priority. So like I said, we're always kind of one thing away, one domino from falling from having a new transportation priority. So back to this slide, we have the regional bodies up top that I mentioned, and that's kind of how we form, at least regionally, priorities, and then we kind of, each county and city has their own priorities within that help build the regional plan. A lot of our projects have to be in these regional documents to get federal dollars, state dollars, and so on. We're always working with consultants. I mentioned one that we have on board, one of our own calls for the Smart Scale application assistance, and then also doing the due diligence for those future applications, kind of figuring out what's going to be eligible for each pot. We also use them time and again for studies. Whether we need a fairground corridor study, while it was done through VDOT, they utilized a consultant. I had proposed to the board to utilize a consultant to look at some sidewalk. We're going to punt that for now, but anytime we need a study done, we're going to immediately turn to consultants. So we have a great relationship with them. And then VDOT, Mr. Spooner, you did touch on it, that I do feel we have a great relationship with VDOT currently, and
Thanks for that.
we are working on meeting with them monthly to discuss maintenance items. We meet quarterly to discuss big picture things, and I'm always able to just call up any one of the folks at the Ashland residency, which is our residency responsible for Houston County, to call them up and have a conversation about any project. I actually talked about both Hockett Road and Oldville yesterday, just picked up the phone and called Philip, who's been absolutely outstanding, him and Marshall. And then a big thing that VDOT does offer every locality, and we have utilized this a lot in the past, and I certainly hope to continue to do that, is what's called pre-scoping. You can submit, hey, we're gonna submit this application for smart scale. Well, now would be the time, because the applications don't open until next year, to submit what's called a pre-scoping application. So they look at eligibility, and if you shorten the scope and bring the cost down, we think you'd be in the sweet spot. So before you do a lot of the hard work and get these estimates and concept drawings, it's, here's what we're thinking, broad 10,000 foot level. Before we get down to the 5,000 or 2,000 foot level, let's have a conversation with VDOT to determine, is this a good application? Are we wasting our time? Should we change the scope to get extra points here and here? Or do we shave the scope to save some money to be able to score well? So that's something that we, like I said, we have utilized in the past. We do hope to continue to utilize with them. But again, that goes back to the great relationship we have with both the actual residency folks, but also at the district and their planning staff. Because all of those conversations happen with the planning staff. And we have had many conversations with them about upcoming smart scale, the Route 288 projects that we're anticipating to submit in 2024, the 3 288 projects, and then we're having a conversation about the road widening now that it's official. Project Rocky is hitting pause, I'll say. So we may have to find a fourth application for that, but that's part of the conversation with VDOT. So I anticipate having a lot of those conversations moving forward. And then really future topics, I'm always looking for opportunities where VDOT can come in and educate not only myself but the board. One thing I think we're going to look at is, hopefully before Smart Scale gets underway, VDOT has what's called eTrans. It's a portal that VDOT uses that they've identified needs across the state. And if we don't hit one of those needs, so to speak, the project isn't going to be eligible for like a Smart Scale or any of your major funding pots. So educating, coming in and having a conversation with the board and myself about VTrans and what the needs are in the county, any comments, concerns that we would have. We think we have a need here, but it's not represented. So we have opportunities like that. And then a big piece that I was hoping to touch on today to a certain degree, but I need some more time to really digest and talk to my counterparts in other counties, is Smart Scale changed their scoring criteria. The initial feedback is they're really looking forward in economic development and congestion. The initial run through, they took round 5, which was this last round, and used the new criteria and applied it to see what would have happened and did a what if. There's a chance we could have gone 4 for 4 if we'd used the new scoring in round 5. We could have gotten 4 projects
You got picked
funded.
up on the economics.
So, right, it's really picking up on economic development and then future congestion, where Ashland Road would have scored empirically, instead of having to have all the political conversations in the back room, we would have scored up front to get the money. Our 288 projects we're expecting now to be successful, even though they have large asks, because they're expensive, because of economic development and future congestion outlooks. So
Maybe that does put the bridge higher.
there still needs to be the whole Henrico County
I understand,
conversation.
but I'm just
There's that
saying.
hurdle, but I certainly agree with that. So
Yeah.
staff's gonna hopefully in the next workshop be able to, as we talk about Smart Scale and that gets underway, really be able to give a detailed analysis, so to speak, of what that new scoring criteria means for us.
And that pops in the next round.
Correct, so that'll be round 6, which is 2024.
Right.
So we're really looking forward to seeing what that is, and then also just continuing application scoring and funding scenarios. So I mentioned we'll have an idea for revenue share and transportation alternatives in February, so I'll be able to share that with the board, kind of where we stand on that. But then as we all go through CBTA scoring, TPO scoring, just to be able to share that whenever we do get those news items from those bodies. And then, as always, anything the board wants to discuss moving forward. I have 2 new board members here, board members elect. I'm happy to get your thoughts on anything you want to hear from me in the future, anything you want to discuss. That's always something that I solicit. So that's my presentation. I'm happy to.
Go back to that Whitehall Road
Yes.
bridge.
Yes.
So we've identified that it's a safety issue because we can't get these heavy moving and ask Eddie to lighten up on his trucks. No.
Throw a couple people under the set.
But,
That's water, yeah.
at what point does that, public safety step in and say, that takes a little, it bumps it up on priority?
But we have plenty of
How do we
people. We have plenty of weight-limited bridges in the county. That's not the only one.
Right.
When they're called structurally deficient.
Oh,
But there's
Right.
plenty of them
There are,
throughout
I
the
think-
county.
so they have to realize, navigate
They have
through
to,
it,
they
yeah.
have to route around.
It's, I wanna say there's 8 or 10
Yes,
weight limit
Yeah.
bridges.
Chief.
I mean, no, about the can of worms, Mr. Ferguson.
Yeah, this is only one mile long, not long, really not long.
So I appreciate the discussion on this. There are 3 bridges that fire rescue can't cross with the fire engines. There's one on Whitehall Road that actually is rated the best of the 3, 15 tons. There's one on Old Columbia Road for 13 tons. And there's one on Haskins Road for 13 tons. And we've been looking at this for a number of years, and this last flight we talked about this type of thing. And when we ran the numbers, 2021, 2020, it affected about 400 homes, 400 residents. And I'm sure that number may have gone up some now.
Chief, what's the weight on an engine?
So a fire engine is about 30 tons, and a ladder truck would be, of course, 75,000 pounds up to 40 tons. And their tankers are heavier than our engines. And so it adds about 3 to 5 minutes of response time to get to a home. And also, you have to look at that, the compounded effect of that, because if a dry hydrant is on the other side of that bridge and we're going to get water for a real water supply, then it's adding time there. And the workaround routes, in some cases, aren't as good as the primary route, like Whitehall Road. I don't know what your opinion of how good of a road you think that is. It's probably one of the better secondary roads in the county, but the workaround roads are not as good. And so that's kind of what, it's
But
a challenge.
that's on already, but the piece that's already on extended response time goals based on location, right? So it's response time near Whitehall.
Well, I'll give you an
is different.
example. If there's a house fire on Whitehall, and the units from Company 6 coming across, sometimes they would go Forest Grove, but they may not be able to do that because they can't cross that bridge, or the units coming from the courthouse bringing additional help have to take an alternative route. The two that concern me equally as much is that Old Columbia Bridge, because, when you look at Old Columbia Bridge, this happened yesterday morning, where we had an incident. It was a minor incident, it wasn't anything major. And it was on Elk Island, it was on Columbia Road near Elk Island Road. And so units had to go up 6, come back in the other side because the address was on the other side of that bridge. But then when you get, we had smoke in a house over off of Haskins Road a couple of weeks ago. And when you're coming from Company 4 and you're going to Haskins Road, and you can't cross that bridge, you've got to go around 45 and come back around, St. Paul's Church. Or Company 5's got to go Rock Castle Road and come in 3 Square. And so they're major issues, in my opinion, as fire chief, that prevent us from getting to emergencies in the quickest response route. I don't know where they fall in the list of projects and that type of thing, but we had GIS run maps and plot homes and that type of thing. And it's a constant struggle to keep our personnel informed of those weights, and they have to make those decisions in the middle of an emergency as to whether they can cross those bridges or they can't. And I'll tell you, this came up before, and I don't speak for the schools, but school buses can 10 to 16 tons. Some of the school buses, I guess, are kind of right on the edge of some of those bridges, is what I think I know. But you'd have to ask the school to be sure of that. Ambulances are about 8 tons, so we do cross them with the ambulances without any problems. But most all of our fire engines, excluding the brush trucks, are not legally supposed to cross those bridges.
See, those two, Old Columbia and Haskins, are not on any of our list.
Yeah,
We're not even looking at those,
bridges are tricky because
which is a problem.
they don't, if we fix a weight limit bridge, it doesn't solve any congestion issues. The safety score would be low because safety in this case is looking at incidents, accidents, things like that. So we don't score well with bridges. There's limited funding pots. SGR, the state of Go, repairs one specifically for bridges, but it has to be what's considered structurally deficient. We have a lot of, step up from structurally deficient. I forget the phrase, but most of the bridges we have in the county that are weight limited fall into that category. So they're almost structurally deficient, which is bad as far as the bridge's health, but
Yeah.
good for funding. It doesn't mean the bridge is getting ready to fall down. It just has deteriorated to a point that it needs to be looked at and it needs to be replaced. It's with the infrastructure bills that have passed in the last several years, there's always new opportunities coming forward, and we continually talk to VDOT about those. But bridges are just a tricky scenario where, unfortunately, they're just not eligible for a lot of pods unless they're in conjunction with something else. Whitehall specifically, we have had conversations with VDOT about providing an estimate. Are there other ways to go about this? If we do a 50-50 split through revenue share, as I mentioned, revenue share is pretty much, if you have the money and it's a low cost, you're probably going to get the other half of the money through the state. We don't know what the cost is for that. Then we have a situation like a Riddles Bridge, where the name is a little interesting, but it's not actually a bridge crossing. It's several culverts in line that is also, I believe, weight limited, and it floods consistently. So it's not very effective as a bridge or a drainage structure, but it needs to be
So it's
replaced.
not called a bridge,
Right,
because it's not good
right.
at it, right?
We've done studies to show what the recommended improvement would be to be above those flooding lines, and it's significantly expensive. To replace those 3 or 4 culverts, large culverts, we're talking a 60-foot bridge. I don't want to begin to think what that's going to cost. It's going to be poured concrete like every new bridge is now. So that is, unfortunately, with bridges, they're just very tricky. It's trying to continuously track both what's coming out of the federal government infrastructure bills. VDOT's even having a hard time keeping track of the different grant
So they want to
opportunities.
spend $1 million to protect 100,000. I can see a wonderful 60-foot bridge going nowhere. You gotta take all that in consideration, how many people live in that area and all.
And that is, I don't know what goes into the SGR scoring. As I mentioned, the Whitehall Road Bridge did not score well enough to receive funding through that program. I don't know what all goes into that scoring, as far as if it takes into account density of population or if it's just specifically looking at the structure.
And they're only looking at automobiles, not fire.
So they look at the bridge as a whole. When they do the inspection reports, they do include the analysis of the different types of vehicles that could go across it. And the weight limit bridges we have in the county are all older. They're all timber bridges. They're just built with 8x8s and 10x10s, and they're paved over. That's what they consist of. There's very little concrete structures that are weight limited in the county. Whitehall Road has, I think, 3 or 4 bridges, and including that one, but the others are newer. They're concrete. They're built. They're nice. They have no weight limit issues. The fire response time, I know there's the 3 priority ones. I think overall we have about 8 or 10 total weight limit timber bridges left in the county. Some of them are on roads that are so infrequently traveled. We probably we'll get to them at some point, but it will be some time. I think one of them is actually on Elk Island. It's like an 8 or a 10 ton bridge. So we're trying to figure out, so some of them can get light, and we're not the only county struggling with this, but there's infrastructure grant opportunities out there. VDOT's even having a hard time keeping track of what's going on in the federal government with the infrastructure bills. And that was passed several years ago, 2 or so years ago now. There's still things coming out of that as we learn what the bill really consisted of, as far as funding. So
It sounds like of the 8 or 10, there's really 3 that are critical for the
Right.
public safety.
and those are the 3 we shared with
One of
VDOT.
which is deteriorating enough to qualify for money.
Right.
How much would the other 2 have to deteriorate to qualify for money?
So they are,
Oh, yeah.
Don't put up
Yeah.
any cameras.
Never mind, I withdraw the
You
question.
gonna do that at night, or?
I withdraw.
so I will say that the bridges that are with themes, the phrase I believe is that they're cusp bridges, so they're just on the cusp. Once they hit that point, they are inspected actually annually to determine, and the most recent inspection is where Whitehall did degrade enough to become structurally deficient, thus making it eligible. But I've continually shared with VDOT folks in Ashland that it's a priority. And there was an initial thought that maybe they could pay for it out of state forces. That's their pot of money, and do it almost as a maintenance project. But I think the scope of rebuilding it, because they won't rebuild it in kind. It's not going to be weight limited. It's not going to be wood. It's going to be a concrete bridge with
Right.
no weight limit restrictions on it or vehicle restrictions. The cost became too prohibitive for them to do it out of a maintenance dollar, so to speak, out of their budget for that. So we're continuing to have those conversations, but they are tricky. Anything else?
What are the other factors that come into play? mean, when you say they evaluate not just the weight, I mean, I've heard economic development a couple of times coming in as a consideration.
Mentioning the bridges specifically?
Yes, sir.
So I don't know exactly what the scoring criteria is that SGR uses to grade the bridges. I know that the inspection reports look at subgrade, grade, what the materials are, erosion, at the paving condition and things like that, and then that creates the inspection grade of either structurally deficient, cusp, or good, fair, and so on. But I don't know the exact scoring criteria that they then take that bridge report, put it into this scoring system, and it spits out a number, and we didn't get the funding. I don't know how they got to that point.
I know at Farm Bureau, the weight restrictions are frequent topic of conversation, and some of the traversing. I don't know, USDA has got, the farm bill is everything except farming sometimes. And I don't know if there would be resources available through USDA that would support the farming community, because those combines are way in excess of 13 tons. And you mentioned Elk Island, I know the offices farm that, and they've got issues down there as to how they can get certain equipment from point A to point B. It's an outside the box thought, but USDA amazed me sometimes with what they consider germane to agriculture and what they will fund. I don't know if those might be avenue to pursue.
It's certainly a conversation we can have. I don't know to what degree maybe that's been utilized before, but the money that we would chip track down would, depending on the program, need to be kind of approved, so to speak, by VDOT, because if they're going to be managing the project, they're going to be the one receiving the funds or getting reimbursed for the funds. So can VDOT enter into an agreement with the USDA or other entity? I don't know, but it's certainly something worth exploring. I'd love to get those. The Whitehall Road Bridge specifically, I live right at the bridge, so I'd love to get that one replaced then, because it's a nightmare anyway. It needs to be repaved. But I'd love to get that one done, because I sure want Fire Chief and his crews to be able to get to my house. God forbid I need them.
Pay for it if you like.
Your future topics of education through VDOT, can we include in it, you mentioned that system that they were, the traffic?
V-Trans.
V-Trans?
Yes.
Is there any education available regarding what it means for kind of self-managed projects and what their recommendations are? If we could look into maybe that.
I can have them come and talk about what's called the locally administered program. It's the LAP. And kind of give a brief synopsis on that particular program.
Okay. If it's worthwhile, I mean, look at it, if it's
I think it is.
worthwhile.
And I'm always having conversations with the planning staff about educational opportunities. V-Trans is one that they have done before for other localities, and that's the first one that immediately comes to mind because it is so impactful. But I definitely think there's other opportunities.
Board, anything else?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, just two things.
Last one, right?
Yeah, that's-
Line it down.
All right, that sounds good. A couple of things, and this is really, both of these are really important for the incoming board to help them do their job going forward. But you mentioned we're only one approval away from a major reshuffle. You've got the SPIDA coming, and that's about 3,000 undeveloped acres at the intersection of 288 and 6, prime economic development area. And any additional economic development, especially thousands of acres, is going to put some pressure on some of the weak spots. One is River Road coming into 6. It's a 5-way intersection, and it's not a 90-degree. It's all angles, line of sight is horrible. So any major increase in economic activity in that area is going to put a lot of pressure on that intersection to be maybe turned into a 90-degree with maybe a roundabout on the other side. There's a lot of different ideas, but a second one is Hockett, the southern terminus, where it tees at 6. That's a failing intersection already. Any additional development of hundreds, if not thousands of acres on Hockett that creates additional traffic. You may need the terminus, may not need a light, may or may not need turn lanes, it's going to need something to the northern terminus and Broad. We're already talking about the realignment, so that'll fix
So
that.
the realignment doesn't go all the way to 6?
No, that realignment.
It's all concentrated right there.
It'll solve the northern terminus T at Broad, but it does nothing for the southern terminus at 6, where it's a T. And I've driven by there when Capital lets out, and there's as many as 25 or 30 cars backed up on Hocken because the lead car is trying to turn left across a 4-lane divided highway of 60-mile-an-hour traffic that's a non-stop. And they're waiting for a tiny little break where they can cross their fingers, jam the gas, and close their eyes and hope they make it. And that, until that spot opens up, all the right turn lane traffic is all backed up. So adding a right turn lane would get half of that traffic through. So anyway, you see where I'm going with this, is you've got failing places now, and with 3,000 acres around that, some of it northeast, some northwest, some southeast, it could, one approval of some master plan, small area plan, like we do with Centerville in SPIDA, could rearrange a lot of the priorities. That's one. So SPIDA hasn't happened yet. The Southern Prime Economic Development Area study hasn't happened yet. It'll be similar to the small area studies, except it's not a small area.
It's a big
large
area.
Second thing, and so just be aware that that's something that could put pressure on priorities for the transportation. Second thing, this is really more beneficial, I think, is what was very helpful for me early on was the major thoroughfare plan, where they brought in a consultant, plotted out the county, put all the primary roads on it, all the secondaries, all the collector roads, all the main roads, not the little tiny ones. And they said, okay, here's red, yellow, and green. You know, traffic moves, here, and here's your red failing places. And we put some roundabouts in some of those reds and got to clean that up. The biggest, brightest red was at 288 and Broad, where there were no lights there when you come off, and the accidents happen routinely. So they fixed both of those and took those reds off. But where I'm going with this is the consultant came in and said, here's where we are today, 10 years given your comp plan, here's where we'll be. 20 years from now, given your comp plan, here's where we'll be. And they took it out too far, and said 100 years from now, you'll need Broad to be 4 lanes all the way out to Charlottesville, which said, stop.
Yeah.
Went too far. But, so throttle back a little bit. But for me, it was helpful to see that over time, 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, how the greens turned yellow and turned red, and you knew where the growth would put your pressure, so you could anticipate some of that a little bit. So, resurrecting that major thoroughfare plan and the multi-year look to see where the greens turn yellow, yellows turn red over time. There's where your problems are going to be, so you know where to delegate your resources. Now, that major thoroughfare plan is now probably due for an update at some point, but the subordinate plans should probably not be updated until we update the strategic plan, which needs to be updated, which is the umbrella plan. Then these subordinated plans, the fire rescue master plan, the major thoroughfare plans, all the subordinate plans, all those gears need to mesh. So you start with the umbrella and the strategic direction and vision and core values and all that, and then you kind of develop these plans underneath that. And the idea behind all of this is to identify the desired level of service, LOS, and the current level of service, and identify any gaps in any of the services we provide, public safety, public education, fire rescue, thoroughfare plan, roads. Identify any gaps, then close those gaps, but then project into the future where the demand for each of those services is going to go, and plan to develop the county in such a way so that those gaps don't develop in the future, don't expand in the future. So identify gaps today, close the gaps, build out a plan that says we're going to build along services along with the demand for services, so the level of service doesn't deteriorate. And that's response times by sheriff, response times by fire and rescue, seats, trailers in the schools for the overflow. I mean, all of that can be taken care of if you plan properly. So, but all that starts with a strategic plan, goes into the major thoroughfare plan. One of those plans that for me was very helpful to look into the future to say where the roads are going to develop over
When
time.
you say strategic, you're talking about the county's
Yes.
strategic plan, which
Yes.
needs to be updated. Last time was 2018.
Correct.
Yeah, Vic gave us copies of that, and I read it. It's a,
That was one of the very first things we did.
It's like, yeah,
12
because you
years ago.
got to start somewhere, right?
Yeah.
That's the big picture.
You gotta know where
I
you're
know what
headed.
you were referring to, a strategic plan for roads.
Well, that's
That's
a
the
major
thoroughfare.
thoroughfare plan, is a subordinate plan to
Yeah.
that overarching plan. The board sets the direction for the county based on citizen input.
How old is that, Austin?
The major thoroughfare plan was done at the same time, it was 2018,
18.
and it looked out to 2040. The thought process moving forward, we've had conversations with both the partner and planning staff, is regionally, the long-range plan that the TPO has is updated every 5 years. We should really be on a similar cycle, not necessarily in the same year, but we've talked about now working the major thoroughfare plan rewrite into the work plan, because right now it is 5 years old today, 2023. It's about to be 6 years old. So work that into a plan moving forward to update it, but then continually keep that in the work plan for county staff and to either bring somebody on or do it internally one day and update it. Because if the regional plan is getting updated every 5 years, but we're only doing ours every 8 or 10 years, we're gonna lose out on new priorities we may not know exist because we haven't done the overall broad review of the county's transportation maps. So I think that's something that we're certainly looking at moving forward.
Yeah, I mean,
is
for
keeping
instance,
that in.
the comprehensive land use plan is required by state code, correct me if I'm wrong, to be looked at every 5 years. And you can do marginal updates or a wholesale update, but the comp plan, for instance, is required every 5 years. The regional transportation plan is done every 5 years. So our 2018 to 20, that's 5, 6, 7 years. The reason we didn't do it this year is it didn't make any sense for us to do it just on the way out the door. So it's a little dated, a little long in the
Just
tooth,
kick the can all down the
but
road.
it's,
I mean, kick it all down to the new guy, kick the can.
No.
They've accomplished a lot. Of course, you saw the check marks getting done,
I'm just
but
kidding.
they didn't get to,
yeah,
you
no,
know.
and
get
we thought it was
everything.
appropriate to do that in this
Sure.
case, for you to freshen up the plan with your vision and set the course for the next period of time, and take a fresh set of eyes and maybe improve on what we did.
But just remember, you said you weren't going very far. Your vision is important.
But you also know, you also know nobody has my
Yeah.
cell number. I just set up the backup signal. My cell number? But no, and of course, again, I think it's appropriate for the new board to come in and put their fingerprint on it and not have a legacy that, and, you know, as you all know, no previous board can bind
That's
subsequent
right.
boards on anything. So it's a free rein, but anyway, so what I'm saying is, as far as roads go, that major thoroughfare plan, multi-year outlook was helpful for me in terms of helping set at least the backdrop. And then you superimpose the sheriff's list and the accidents and all, but at least you kind of know generally where things are headed, so. And we should update that more frequently.
That's something we're looking at, so we certainly
Those are
will.
the two things I had, the speeder, you know, may upset the apple cart, and then the rural thoroughfare
Just
plan.
provide new data, really. That's all we'll do.
Yes, it will.
Do we have a list of acronyms anywhere?
VDOT actually has a book. It's pages long, yeah. Yes. Charlie?
Transportation is the alphabet soup.
I missed about 90 seconds of what you said, Ken, apologies. But Hockett Road, I mean, one thing that in my mind sticks out, a lot of it being in my district, is the topography, just like Fairgrounds Road, it doesn't allow it in certain areas. Now, luckily, the flow and, you know, in my interpretation, the just sheer volume might not warrant 4 lanes of traffic. And it's how do we address it in the key spots. You know, I look at Hockett Road and I think a lot of what you're talking about, where we get the biggest issues, could be addressed with creative actions on Patterson and River. Patterson, where's the
Yeah.
the spot where it officially changes names, but you know what I'm talking about. And I've seen good examples. You know, I look at it and go, okay, where have I seen something like this? And Highway 1, that in North Carolina and south of here, is a great example. There are a number of situations where, okay, I need gas. I'm getting off and having to take a left turn to get back to the direction I want to go. They actually, on the main thoroughfare, have extended their U-turn lane, so to speak, and then put a light at a very strategic point. We don't need it where Hope Church is, because we've got the lights, and so that helps resolve a lot of that traffic. But if I'm thinking of Hockett Road specifically, I think a lot of that solution might be on Patterson River, and being, you know, creative with one signal and on Highway 1 has many examples of It is a signal for a U-turn lane specifically. And it just gets you out of a major congestion, because where you're talking about, if I'm thinking of it correctly, it's 20-foot drops. That is just a difficult engineering plan.
The line of sight is an issue.
Yeah.
You mentioned at Hockett, last time I talked to VDOT, between Patterson and 250,
Uh-huh.
the capacity utilization is down around 20%. The terminus fail miserably and back up traffic big time. So, yeah, the fixes are not widening Hockett, it's moving traffic. Now, when you go down to the southern terminus on Patterson, a lot of times Cap One and CarMax and West Creek lets out 288's a parking lot. They'll go down Hockett, they'll even go over to Hermitage. Or if they're coming out of Richmond on Patterson and want to go 288 south, they don't get on that cloverleaf that takes them north to go south. They'll go down and do a flippy and get on the south one and save themselves 10 cars. So the jump across Hockett, jumping across to go left on Patterson, you've got this flippy traffic doing the U-turns all the time.
Is that the official transportation?
Yeah.
It's not
That's a
Maximum.
technical term.
Yeah.
Does everybody know what I mean? Okay, good.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's a technical term. I'm gonna patent that term. Anyway, but that adds, so you're trying to turn left while these other cars are just nonstop waiting to turn left in front of you.
Yep.
And some places, the island is wide enough that if you make the jump on half of it and wait,
Yep.
but some of it's so skinny, you end up hanging over on both sides,
Right.
in the fast lanes on both sides. And that's, so anyway, to your point,
Yeah.
somebody at some point is gonna need to look at it holistically and say, what's the broader solution here?
Well, I feel like
It's a
in
Patterson.
Henrico County, we're talking about a concrete island that's 3.5 feet wide, and then you get to Gooch border and it becomes the green space island
A little wider.
that might be 20 feet wide, you know, for that period between there and Luckstone. So that's the example I think we're thinking of. Do we need to consider an extension of that skinnier out to provide some solutions? Yeah.
That's, again, it's gonna be calling question a lot of this, and it'll be a comprehensive solution.
You might not get green in the middle, but you still have great green.
Why not actually float the idea for just a second, that coming west on Patterson to get on 288 south, you do the Cloverleaf, but the Cloverleaf, when you come around the Cloverleaf, there's an acceleration lane that's about 12 feet long. So you're coming in at 20 miles an hour around a really tight Cloverleaf, and then you're forced into 70-mile-an-hour traffic at 20 miles an hour, and that backs up everything. So they floated the idea of possibly, they came and said, well, how about if we just close that Cloverleaf? And you don't have that 20-mile-an-hour traffic moving and everything will flow. And we said, well, geez, well, then everybody coming west on Patterson can't get on 288 without doing a flippy and doing, I mean, that just creates more problems than it solves, I think.
Right.
So they're looking at that hard running lane, taking that
Yes,
across the
exactly.
bridge, so the acceleration lane effectively becomes
There
a
are
couple
peak
of,
times.
quarter mile or half mile long, which is much better, because then you can get up to speed from 20 to 60 before you move in. So anyway, those are the complexities. It's not gonna be solved here now, but I wanted to just raise it as that speed as economic development, and then also this master thoroughfare plan that might be helpful for folks to see when pressures are coming over the medium to longer term. So that's all. I'll yield back the rest of my time.
Awesome. All right, anybody, any other comments, any other thoughts?
Right, how long would it take to update that? I was just wondering, if it'd be meaningful to take a look at the existing one.
To update the major thoroughfare plan, it would be significant. I would probably say,
Let's take a look at what we got. So maybe around
We gotta start with the strategic plan there first.
Yeah, go to the comp plan, the major thoroughfare
Look
plan,
updating.
fire rescue
Well, you
plan.
gotta, update the strategic plan before you even get to the.
Gotcha.
it will get there, but every one of those updates is gonna take
Take 40
time.
years.
Okay, anything else?
Thank you very much, appreciate the update.
Susan, Ken,
Thank you.
Thank you.
last meeting?
Yeah, don't
Thank
always,
y'all.
no special meetings now.
Yeah, you never know.
You do that on 3 days, 3 days.
What?
Oh, you did?
2 on 2.
Okay, you got 2 on 2s, okay.
One
You're not done yet.
Tuesday.
I hope y'all will continue to feel welcome in future board.
He only gets 3
What
minutes
kind
now,
of food? I
so.
don't see bagels or cream cheese
And the
or
peanut gallery.
chocolate chip strawberries, or I don't see anything, anyway. Yes, we will. Thank you for
All
your
right.
Austin,
invitation.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very helpful. Board, we are adjourned to our Tuesday, January 2nd, 2024 meeting. And the time for that meeting will be set at